Typhus is a series of bacteria that when a human gets infected with them, they have similar symptoms. Some of the strains of typhus are epidemic, endemic, and scrub. I'm going to focus on the one with the longest history, or epidemic typhus, which is caused by Rickettsia prowazekii. Howard T. Ricketts named it after a colleague, Stanislaus von Prowazek, who died while studying it. He later died from typhus too. Typhus attacks the cells in the lining of the blood vessels and other organs. The body defends by producing antibodies, having fever, and inflaming, but this is not enough in most untreated cases, and the patient may die or have permanent symptoms due to the response not being strong or fast enough. Common symptoms of epidemic typhus are fever, which is common in all forms of typhus, rash that starts from the chest and spreads outward, sensitivity to light, delirium, low blood pressure, and death. It takes disease about 1 to 2 weeks to run through its course. Typhus or Rickettsia prowazekii can return later in Brill-Zinsser's form, but is almost never deadly. One of the long-term effects typhus can have is a reoccurring infection that happens later on. This is called Brill-Zinsser's disease. This reoccurrence is often harmless and goes away with little problems. Typhus can also cause permanent damage to blood vessels, which may result in heart and kidney problems. Typhus can also sometimes cause mental problems like hallucinations and paranoia. Typhus spreads in dirty, unsanitary conditions. It can be spread through direct contact with body lice, or it can spread through airborne louse feces. If lice are on the body, the human scratches the bites, and through abrasion allows bacteria into the body. Humans, flying squirrels, and rodents are reservoirs for epidemic typhus. It is more common in poor, crowded areas like prisons or refugee camps. Although not very common, typhus mostly occurs in colder regions of Central and Eastern Africa, Central and South America, and Asia. In recent years, most of the typhus outbreaks have taken place in Burundi, Ethiopia, and Rwanda. That doesn't mean it only occurs in those places. Recently, there has been reports of typhus in the Laos of the flying squirrel, which inhabits North America. Although extremely rare, typhus is known for its explosive outbreaks during war and famine. It is often diagnosed through blood tests and skin biopsies. A skin biopsy simply is removing a piece of the rash and running tests on it. Typhus can be prevented by staying away from areas that have had a recent outbreak and use insect repellent whenever you travel. The chick embryo vaccine by H.R. Cox is no longer in production, but there are some military vaccines for high-risk situations. Rickettsia prowazekii is a protobacteria that has an oval rod shape. It can live in an oxygenated environment and target cells in the lining of the blood vessel. Rickettsia prowazekii can be grown in eggs, cultures, and animals for study. Rickettsia prowazekii is transmitted through louse feces and is also available in a zoonotic form, but this form is less severe and death is unheard of from this form. If someone contracts typhus, the person would be prescribed antibiotics. The antibiotics would stop the infection and almost always save the patient. If no treatment is given, there's a 10 to 40% fatality rate depending on the age of the patient. The older you are, the more deadly it is. Typhus is transmitted through louse. Strange thing is the bacteria kills the vector as well. The dead louse body can still transmit the bacteria for weeks after it has died. We can transmit the disease to louse. People with Brill-Zinsser disease can infect louse as well. Typhus is recognized by the World Health Organization. In the United States, we have the Center for Disease Control to help us with typhus. The course of infection consists of a 2-week incubation period. Then after the incubation period, the first symptoms may be headaches, fever, chills, muscle pains, and exhaustion. After 4 to 6 days, a rash may appear on the back or chest and spread outwards, and as the rash progresses, the rest of infection may become dark and maculopapular as it spreads everywhere except in the face, palms, and soles. In severe cases, the rash may become petechial, hemorrhagic, and gangrenous. The symptoms generally last for 1 to 2 weeks. Although controversial, there was a plague that could have been typhus in Greece in 430 BC, called the Athenian Plague. It happened during a war between the Athenians and the Sparta. A lot of it occurred in the Athenian navy, which correlates to it spreading in such a small space. If true, that means this is the first recorded epidemic of typhus. Although we do not know a lot about typhus during the Dark Ages, we can assume that it had its fair share of typhus because they didn't have very good hygienic habits. I have no actual documentation, but it is an educated guess. A typhus outbreak had occurred in 1489 that killed 17,000 of 25,000 soldiers in a month. This caused the remainder of the army to retreat, but this has its consequences. The soldiers who survived brought typhus back to Europe where it spread. This means now because of Spain, Europe now has typhus present. During the year of 1525, Charles V of Spain took hostage of Francis I of France, which made the Pope of the time, Clement VII, who secretly favored Spain at the time, flee the country and move to the Vatican. The next year, in 1526, they signed a peace treaty which released Francis I from captivity and let him go back to his subjects. Charles V then declared war on the French for Clement's now vocal preference of France, which is not allowed. He attacked Rome and Europe attacked back on Charles V now. After defending his mighty army, Charles V was pushed back to the port town of Naples, which at the time he was told to surrender. Typhus shows up and wreaks havoc on the French, making them believe it was an act of God and retreat. An estimated 25,000 French died from the disease. It also killed 10,000 of Charles' own men. It shows misunderstanding of the disease as an act of God. During the 30 Years' War, which occurred from 1618 to 1648, typhus was responsible for 10 million deaths in the 30 Years of War. Typhus could have looked to someone not knowing that it's bacteria like its own army. It was most deadly during the first 15 years of war. The year is 1812, and Napoleon of France attacks Russia. His advisors told him not to because supplies would be slow and the soldiers would get hungry and they couldn't go into the villages due to a typhus outbreak, but he did anyways, and told the men not to raid the villages. The men raided the villages, and 80,000 perished from typhus. He prepared another army, but it met the same fate. During the 19th century, Ireland had a bad typhus outbreak, and surprise, surprise, they weren't in a war with anyone. We can estimate that at its worst, 1816, 700,000 in the population of 6 million had a case of typhus. In 1910, Nikolai proved that it was transmitted through lice. No more surprises about typhus transmission, but the control techniques to put typhus in check were not in time for World War I. I'm going to highlight a few facts and not summarize the war. In World War I, typhus was a problem for the Germans. Germans learned from previous wars that invading a country with typhus was bad news, so that played a role in them not invading Siberia. They also had fears that since there were scattered outbreaks of typhus among the Russians, that it might spread to their forces. Russia was going through the war with a horrible famine and typhus outbreak, and throughout the whole war, Germans never really invaded Siberia for the fear that if they invaded Siberia, they would catch typhus and it would destroy their ranks like it's destroying the Russians' ranks. Typhus was not a problem for Americans in World War II, but the Germans suffered. H.R. Cox discovered he could grow typhus in a fertile egg membrane, which led to it becoming a vaccine and getting approved. Due to DDT and other pesticides in H.R. Cox's research on the vaccine, it was not a big problem and cases were decreasing. During the war, some epidemics in Egypt and other countries around this area had outbreaks, which scientists used to study typhus and create a system that could be used on the public. Germans without access to our preventative measures had no defense, and had 16,000 cases the first year they reported the data. Americans were not likely to bring the disease back home because of pesticides and vaccination. We are in the age where we understand typhus, and understanding typhus is playing a big role in defeating it. Typhus is present around the world, and today the mortality rate is low at around 10% and is most prevalent in areas of crowded people with low sanitation. It can often be treated by catching it early and prescribing antibiotics. It is very uncommon except for in the few areas of the world, including parts of South and Central America. It affects 1 in 5 million people worldwide. DDT and H.R. Cox vaccine made the disease uncommon, but DDT was the most effective. My idea on how we can potentially combat this disease. We will need an international fund for buying and producing insect repellent for city use and to get the production of the H.R. Cox vaccine back up and running. If we do this, this will help stop outbreaks. We will also want international access to antibiotics to help those afflicted with typhus and other diseases. These can be paid for by donation, national programs, or international programs. We will need to sacrifice the funds to do so, though.